What happens when a simple act of kindness turns into a dangerous conspiracy? Claire, a woman who risked everything to save a life, soon finds herself caught in a web of secrets that threaten to destroy her world. With helicopters hovering outside her house and enemies closing in, will she manage to uncover the truth, or will she pay the ultimate price for her courage? Curious? Stay tuned for a thrilling journey filled with unexpected twists and heart-stopping moments. If you're enjoying this story, please leave a comment, like, and subscribe for more. May Allah bless all those who support this channel. Thank you for being part of this adventure. The wind whispered through the pines as Claire Dawson stepped onto the rocky trail. It was her only day off that month, and she chose solitude in the Colorado wilderness over the noise of the city. Hiking had always been her therapy, where she could breathe, think, and for a moment, forget the chaos of the hospital. She had been walking for hours, her backpack light, her boots steady. As she reached a narrow ridge, something caught her ear, a distant, unnatural sound. A groan. Then another. Faint, weak, almost drowned by the breeze. Claire froze. Her instincts as a trauma nurse kicked in. "Hello," she called out. No answer. She moved toward the sound, stepping cautiously off the main trail and into a tangle of scrub and loose rocks. Then she saw him. A man, mid-30s, face bloodied, leg bent unnaturally beneath him. He had clearly fallen a significant distance from the cliff above. He was barely conscious. Claire rushed to his side, quickly assessing his injuries. Compound fracture. Possible internal bleeding. Concussion. No cell signal. No other hikers around. She had no medical tools, only a basic first aid kit, water, and her knowledge. "Hey, stay with me," she said, ripping her jacket into strips to make a splint for his leg. "Don't let me die," he murmured, eyes fluttering. "You won't. Not on my watch." The sun began to dip below the trees. Claire knew she had to get him out before nightfall or he might not survive. She fashioned a makeshift stretcher using branches and her belt, anchoring him as best she could. With sheer determination, she began dragging the stretcher back toward the main trail, her hands blistering, breath ragged. The nearest ranger station was nearly 2 miles away, but quitting wasn't an option. She didn't check the time. She didn't think of her shift starting in just a few hours. She focused on keeping him breathing. It wasn't until the flashing lights of a rescue team greeted her at the base of the trail, summoned by another hiker who had seen her signal fire, that she let her knees give out. She saved his life. But she didn't know then, she had just lost her job. The hospital corridor felt colder than usual as Claire walked through it the next morning, still sore from the hike, her fingers raw from dragging the stretcher. She had dropped off the injured hiker, whose name she learned was Aaron Blake, at the emergency room just before midnight. His vitals were stabilizing, and Claire had stayed until she was sure he was out of danger. She hadn't slept. Still in the scrubs she kept in her car, she walked into the nurse's station, ready to explain her absence and resume her shift. "Claire," said her supervisor, Rhonda Green, standing near her desk with a folded paper in hand. Her expression was unreadable. Claire offered a tired smile. "Hey, I know I missed my shift, but I can explain. I found a hiker. He was badly injured. I had to." "You abandoned your scheduled trauma rotation," Rhonda cut her off. "You didn't notify anyone. And you weren't reachable for hours." "I didn't have signal," Claire replied, holding back disbelief. "I was in the mountains. I saved his life." Rhonda handed her the paper. Claire's heart sank as her eyes scanned the words. Termination for job abandonment. Effective immediately. Her breath caught. "You're firing me for saving someone's life." "This isn't about heroism," Rhonda said coldly. "We can't make exceptions. Protocol exists for a reason." Claire's voice shook. "I've worked double shifts, covered emergencies, and never once complained. I gave everything to this hospital. And we thank you for that," Rhonda said, already turning away. "You can collect your things by the end of the day." Claire stood frozen. Nurses nearby watched in silence, some with sympathy, some with avoidance. She walked out of the building numb, her badge still clipped to her chest. The wind outside felt sharper now. Her career, years of sacrifice, overnight shifts, and putting others first, had just vanished. She drove home in silence, her small mountain cabin feeling unusually empty. She sat on the porch, watching the pine trees sway. Then, just as she brought a cup of coffee to her lips, a strange sound shattered the quiet. 2 helicopters appeared from behind the ridge, hovering low above her property. Not search and rescue. Not military. Private. She stood up, shielding her eyes from the sun. One of the helicopters slowly descended, kicking up dust and pine needles, its side door opening before it even landed. A tall man in a dark suit stepped out, walking straight toward her with purpose. "Claire Dawson?" he asked. She nodded, stunned. "We need to talk. Right now." Claire's instincts screamed caution as the suited man approached her porch, but something in his demeanor made her hesitate. He didn't look like a government agent, nor did he have the usual polished coldness of corporate types. There was urgency in his eyes, but also a strange kind of respect. "I'm Marcus Hale," he introduced himself, pulling out a sleek badge that read, Blake Tech Security Division. Blake Tech. The name sent a jolt through Claire's mind. Aaron Blake. The injured hiker she had rescued. She blinked. Wait. Blake. As in Blake Tech, the aerospace and biotech company. Marcus nodded. "You saved the life of our founder's son, Miss Dawson. That makes you a very important person." Claire's mouth parted slightly. "I had no idea. You weren't supposed to." Aaron was on a private survival retreat. No staff, no security. He wanted to test his own endurance off-grid. We weren't even tracking him when he went missing. If you hadn't found him, he would have died in that ravine. Claire took a step back, her thoughts racing. "I was just hiking. I didn't do it for recognition." "I know. That's exactly why we're here." Marcus gestured to the helicopter. "Mr. Blake wants to see you. Personally. Right now." Claire hesitated. Her whole life had just collapsed in less than 24 hours. Now a billionaire wanted to meet her? "What does he want from me?" she asked. Marcus gave a faint smile. "To say thank you. And maybe more than that." She glanced back at her small home, the stack of unpaid bills on her table, the empty refrigerator, the sealed envelope of her termination letter, and then looked again at the helicopter, humming like an invitation to a different world. Her heart pounded as she made her choice. "All right," she said quietly. "I'll come with you." Marcus led her to the chopper. As the rotors spun faster and the earth pulled away beneath her feet, Claire had no idea she was being flown straight into a storm of power, wealth, and secrets. One that would change everything she thought she knew about Aaron Blake and herself. The helicopter sliced through the clouds, its shadow skating over forests and rivers far below. Claire sat strapped in beside Marcus, her knuckles white on the armrests. She wasn't afraid of flying, but she was afraid of what was waiting for her on the other side. "Where are we going?" she asked over the roar of the blades. Marcus turned his head, his voice calm through the headset. "To a private Blake Tech facility, just outside Aspen. Mr. Blake prefers to keep things quiet." Claire nodded slowly, trying to process the surreal turn her life had taken. Yesterday she'd been jobless. Now she was en route to meet one of the most powerful men in the country. The helicopter landed on a sprawling pad nestled in a forest clearing. A modern glass building rose from the trees like something out of a dream, sleek, angular, almost alien. Waiting at the edge of the pad was a man in his early 40s, tall, lean, with silver at his temples and eyes sharp enough to cut glass. Claire recognized him immediately. Aaron Blake. She'd seen his face on the news, read about his innovations, his mysterious reclusive habits. But this was the first time she was seeing him up close, and he was looking straight at her. As she stepped down from the helicopter, their eyes met. Aaron took a few steps forward and extended his hand. "Claire Dawson," he said softly. "You saved my life." She took his hand, stunned by the quiet intensity of his voice. "You don't have to thank me. Anyone would have done the same." Aaron shook his head slowly. "You don't know how wrong that is." He led her inside the facility, through corridors lined with shimmering walls and digital interfaces. Every step seemed to pull her deeper into a world far removed from her own. Inside a private lounge, he offered her tea, then sat across from her. "I was out there because I needed to disappear for a while," he admitted. "I trusted nature more than I trusted people. And I would have died alone if you hadn't come along." Claire sipped her tea, unsure how to respond. Aaron leaned forward, his eyes never leaving hers. "I don't believe in accidents, Claire. I believe you were meant to find me. And I believe you're meant for something bigger." A chill ran down her spine. "What do you mean?" He stood and walked toward the window, the snowy peaks of the Rockies stretching behind him like a painting. "I want to offer you a position," he said without turning around. "But not just a job. A purpose. Something only someone like you can handle." Claire felt the ground shift under her feet. What kind of position could a billionaire offer a woman who just lost everything? When Aaron finally turned to face her, the answer was already forming on his lips. But he didn't speak it, at least, not yet. Instead, he said, "You'll understand soon. For now, rest. Tomorrow we begin." Claire stood at the edge of a balcony the next morning, watching fog drift between the pine trees like smoke from a forgotten fire. Her head still ached with questions. Why her? What did Aaron mean by something only someone like you can handle? She barely had time to gather her thoughts before the door behind her opened with a quiet hiss. Aaron entered, holding 2 mugs of coffee. He handed one to her without a word and joined her at the railing. "I know you have questions," he said finally, his voice low and steady, "and I intend to answer them. But first, I need you to understand something." Claire nodded, sipping the coffee. It was stronger than anything she used to drink. Dark, bold, much like the man standing beside her. Aaron turned toward her. "I didn't just ask you here to say thank you. I brought you here because I saw something in you, something I've been searching for." She furrowed her brow. "Searching for what, exactly?" "A rare type of judgment," he said. "The kind that doesn't hesitate when it sees a life on the line. Most people would have walked past me. They would have panicked or called for help and waited. But you didn't. You acted. You took control, even at great risk to yourself." Claire remained quiet, her chest tightening. "I run a division inside Blake Tech that no one knows exists," Aaron continued. "It deals with situations most governments can't touch. Rescue missions. Humanitarian extractions. Sensitive operations." "Are you talking about a private task force?" Claire asked, half disbelieving. "Something like that. Except our work isn't about force. It's about presence. Influence. Getting in where others can't. You wouldn't be a soldier, Claire. You'd be a sentinel." She blinked. "A sentinel?" Aaron nodded. "We place individuals around the world, strategically, quietly. People with the instinct to do the right thing when it matters most. People who can tip the balance without anyone noticing." Claire exhaled slowly. "You want me to become one of these sentinels?" He took out a small black card from his coat pocket and handed it to her. It had only 2 words printed on it: "Initiate protocol." "If you agree," he said, "this card will open the next door. Training, preparation, access to resources you've never imagined. But once you begin, there's no turning back." Claire stared at the card in her palm. The weight of it wasn't physical, but emotional, psychological. She could almost feel her old life fading behind her. "I'm not special," she said quietly. Aaron smiled faintly. "Exactly. And that's what makes you perfect for this." Thunder rumbled in the distance. Or was it something else? Another helicopter arriving? Before she could ask, Aaron turned and walked away, leaving her alone on the balcony, the card still clutched in her hand. She looked out into the mist again, and realized her next step would change everything. Claire didn't sleep that night. She lay awake in the high-tech guest suite, staring at the ceiling that glowed faintly with embedded light panels. The black card sat on the nightstand like an invitation and a threat all at once. By morning, she still hadn't decided. But then, as the sun rose in golden slants through the window, something shifted inside her. Maybe it was the way the forest outside seemed to hold its breath. Or maybe it was the memory of Aaron's broken body on the cliff and how close death had come to claiming him. She reached for the card. There was no button, no chip, no phone number. Just 2 words: initiate protocol. Claire whispered them aloud. The moment the words left her lips, the lights in the room dimmed. A small panel in the wall slid open with a whisper. Inside was a sleek device, no bigger than a watch face, with a single glowing circle in the center. A voice spoke from the walls. Protocol acknowledged. Beginning induction. Claire held her breath as the device pulsed and projected a hologram in front of her. A woman's face appeared, mid-40s, steely eyes, hair cropped short. Claire Rowan, you've been identified as a Tier 1 candidate. Welcome. Claire sat upright, stunned. This orientation will be brief. You are being offered entry into the Sentinel Initiative, an elite, covert network designed to safeguard human lives through discretion, judgment, and precision. You will not be a soldier. You will not be an agent. You will be a presence. Images began to flash around the woman's face. Floods, riots, rescues. A woman helping evacuate a child from a burning school. A man defusing a tense crowd at a war protest. A nurse performing surgery in a war zone. Claire recognized none of them, but something about each of them felt deeply familiar. You will be trained in 4 sectors: strategy, field medicine, social dynamics, and ethical pressure navigation. Your decisions will shape outcomes, but your face must never be known. Do you accept? The room fell quiet again. Claire stepped forward, her heart pounding, and touched the glowing circle. It blinked once. Then the room shifted. Walls rotated silently, revealing a narrow hallway lined with glass panels. Beyond them were rooms, some with mats and obstacle courses, others with holographic screens displaying world maps. A figure stepped out from one of the rooms. Not Erin. Someone else. A tall woman in a sharp gray uniform and boots that didn't make a sound. You're earlier than expected, the woman said. Good. Let's begin. Claire followed, nerves flaring, but her steps steady. There was no going back now. She didn't know what awaited her, but something inside her had awakened. She wasn't just a former nurse anymore. She was becoming something else. Claire stepped into the training hall with a quiet mix of awe and apprehension. It was unlike any hospital or emergency unit she'd ever seen. This place pulsed with silence, precision, and something unspoken, like every person here had once walked away from a normal life and never looked back. Her instructor, the tall woman in the gray uniform, introduced herself curtly. I'm Rhea. You listen, you move, you adapt. That's how you survive here. Rhea wasted no time. Claire's first day began with an obstacle course that tested her agility and reflexes. It wasn't just physical. Sensors triggered random crises: a simulated fire, a screaming civilian, an injured child calling for help while a building collapsed around them. Claire had to decide who to save, how to respond, and when to retreat, all within seconds. When she hesitated at a virtual crying child, Rhea barked, "Feeling sorry doesn't save lives. Action does." By noon, Claire's limbs ached and her breath came in ragged gasps. Yet her mind was sharper than ever. She was beginning to understand that the Sentinels weren't just rescuers, they were human thresholds between chaos and collapse. After a quick recovery break, she was ushered into a dimmed room with curved screens surrounding her. An AI instructor guided her through the medical segment. Here, she excelled. Claire reconstructed shattered femurs in simulated surgeries, managed internal bleeding with advanced nanobots, and stabilized trauma victims under fake mortar fire. The system tracked every action with brutal honesty. You're too slow with arterial clamps. Better. Faster reaction time on that aneurysm. You saved the mother, but lost the baby. Try again. By the end of the session, Claire's scrub top was soaked with sweat, though she hadn't moved from her seat. That night, she sat in the communal cafeteria with other recruits, though most didn't speak. They nodded once, respectfully, then returned to their silent meals. She noticed a man sitting across the room, face bruised and arm in a sling. Their eyes met for a moment. It was Erin. But he didn't smile. He simply gave a nod, acknowledging her presence, her choice, her path. The silence said more than words could. This was not a place for friendships or comfort. It was a place for purpose. And Claire had just stepped into the furnace. The next few weeks passed in a blur. Each day blurred into the next. Training exercises, simulations, medical procedures, and endless lectures on crisis management. Claire's body grew accustomed to the constant pressure, but her mind never stopped racing. She learned to rely on instinct, not just knowledge. Every day, it felt like she was inching closer to understanding what made the Sentinels so different from the rest of the world. And then came the test. Rhea didn't give much warning. One evening, after the last training session of the day, she gathered all the recruits in the main hall. Claire felt the hairs on the back of her neck stand up, sensing something different in the air. The atmosphere was thicker than usual, heavier with anticipation. "Tomorrow, you will prove yourselves," Rhea said, her voice cold and commanding. "You are not here for training anymore. You are here to save lives, or to fail. There is no in-between. Tomorrow, the real world will come to you." Claire barely slept that night. She lay in her bed, staring at the ceiling, her thoughts a whirlwind of doubt and uncertainty. She had known from the moment she signed up that the Sentinels were a different breed, but this was something else. She wasn't just preparing for another job. This was survival. Her survival. The next morning, Rhea wasted no time. She led the recruits into a simulation room, which now looked eerily real. It wasn't a virtual setup anymore, it was a recreated disaster zone. "A major earthquake just hit the city," Rhea said, her voice carrying over the loudspeakers. "There are no hospitals left standing. There's no rescue team. There's no help. It's just you. You have 1 hour to save as many people as you can. Go." The doors opened, and Claire rushed in, her heart pounding. The floor beneath her trembled with the simulated aftershocks, and the sounds of screams and debris collapsing around her made her senses spike. She could see the wreckage, collapsed buildings, overturned cars, injured civilians lying amidst the wreckage. Claire's training kicked in instantly. Her hands moved without thinking, pulling survivors from rubble, stabilizing the injured, prioritizing the most critical cases. She worked alongside the other recruits, who moved with mechanical precision. She didn't have time to second-guess herself, not now. But as the seconds ticked away, Claire realized something. There was a difference between saving lives in a simulation and saving them in a real, chaotic environment. The panic, the real blood, the lives that hung by a thread, this was what it meant to be a Sentinel. Claire barely had time to assess the damage around her. She was surrounded by injured civilians, their faces twisted in agony, unable to get help. Her hands trembled slightly as she rushed from one to the next. "Stay with me," Claire shouted as she applied pressure to a man's wound. His chest was rising and falling in ragged breaths, his pulse weak. The clock was ticking down, and as the last seconds passed, Claire felt an overwhelming weight settle in her chest. She hadn't saved everyone. She hadn't even come close. The buzzer rang. "Time's up." Rhea's voice echoed in the air, and the room went quiet. "Gather up." The recruits stood in formation, their faces grim. Rhea walked down the line, her gaze assessing each one of them. When she reached Claire, her eyes narrowed. "You hesitated. You didn't prioritize." Her words were blunt, stinging. "You won't make it in the real world if you keep second-guessing yourself." Claire bit her lip, fighting back the frustration and fear bubbling inside her. This wasn't just a test of physical skills. This was about her resolve, her ability to handle impossible situations without faltering. But when she looked at the other recruits, she saw something in their eyes, something she hadn't seen before. The understanding that they were all in this together, but ultimately, it was each person's responsibility to survive. And for the first time since she'd arrived, Claire realized the true weight of the decision she'd made. Claire couldn't shake the feeling of failure from the test. Rhea's harsh words echoed in her head, a constant reminder that she was not yet ready. She spent the next few days training harder, pushing her body and mind to their limits, trying to erase the sting of that failure. She couldn't afford to falter. Not again. But even amidst the intense physical and mental strain, there was something more sinister at play, something Claire couldn't ignore. The Sentinels, as disciplined and organized as they were, had a hidden agenda, a truth that Claire was only just beginning to uncover. It came one afternoon, after a particularly grueling training exercise. Claire had been sent to the debriefing room, expecting to go over her performance, but instead, Rhea was waiting there with a grim look on her face. "You need to know something," Rhea said, her tone unusually serious. "The Sentinels are not just a rescue team. We're a weapon." Claire blinked, momentarily stunned. "What do you mean?" Rhea paused before continuing, her eyes scanning the room as if ensuring no one was listening. "You're not just here to save lives, Claire. You're here to protect an entire system. A system that doesn't just need people like you, it needs people who are willing to do anything, no matter the cost." Claire's heart skipped a beat. "What kind of system are you talking about?" Rhea hesitated before responding, her gaze hardening. "You'll find out soon enough." Before Claire could ask more questions, Rhea stood up and motioned for her to follow. "The truth isn't always something you can prepare for," she added cryptically. That evening, Claire's mind raced. What had Rhea meant? She couldn't get the idea of the Sentinels being a weapon out of her head. She had joined because she wanted to help people, but if this organization was involved in something far darker than rescue operations, what did that mean for her? The next morning, Claire decided to do something she'd never done before. She began digging deeper into the organization's past. She sneaked into the archives of the compound, hoping to find something that could explain Rhea's cryptic words. The files were vast, filled with information about operations and past missions, but it wasn't until Claire stumbled upon a restricted file labeled Operation Sentinel, Global Security, that she felt her heart sink. As she opened the document, she read about a covert initiative that the Sentinels had been a part of for years, an operation designed to intervene in global conflicts, often without the public's knowledge. The Sentinels were not just saving lives. They were manipulating entire situations, using their elite skills to tip the scales in favor of those in power. The true mission of the organization was not about protecting civilians. It was about ensuring control. Claire felt a chill run down her spine as she absorbed the details of Operation Sentinel. The organization had been involved in military operations, secret extractions, and even government-backed interventions in countries around the world. The line between humanitarian aid and covert operations was disturbingly thin. As Claire closed the file, her mind raced. What had she gotten herself into? How far had she already gone down this path? She realized that her choice to join the Sentinels was about to cost her far more than she had ever anticipated. And as she stood there, in the cold silence of the archives, Claire knew one thing for sure. Her time with the Sentinels was no longer about saving lives. It was about choosing which side of this deadly game she would stand on. Claire stood at the window of her small apartment, staring out at the city skyline. The events of the past week had turned her life upside down. Her training had intensified, the missions had become more complex, and the weight of the secrets she had uncovered about the Sentinels began to suffocate her. She had no idea who to trust anymore. She wasn't sure when exactly she had crossed the line between hero and pawn, but now there was no turning back. The Sentinels were not just a rescue operation. They were a shadow organization playing a game of power and control. Every person they saved, every mission they completed, was a calculated move in a much larger game. And Claire had been chosen as a key player. But what was her role in all this? Was she meant to be a savior, or had she unknowingly become part of a much darker operation? As Claire tried to sort through her thoughts, her phone buzzed, snapping her out of her reverie. The number on the screen was unfamiliar, but something told her she needed to pick up. Hesitantly, she answered. "Claire, it's Rhea," came the voice on the other end, low and urgent. "You need to leave. Now." Claire's heart raced. "What's going on?" "There's no time to explain. The mission has been compromised. They know about you. Everything you've found, everything you've learned, they know. You're in danger." Claire's breath caught in her throat. "Who knows? What's going to happen to me?" Rhea's voice dropped even lower. "They'll come for you. I can't protect you anymore. You have to disappear." Claire's mind spun, trying to process Rhea's words. She hadn't expected to be put in this position. Not so soon, not like this. She thought she had time to figure it all out. But now, it was all crashing down around her. "Where do I go?" Claire whispered, her heart pounding in her chest. There was a long pause before Rhea spoke again. "I'll give you the coordinates. But you have to act fast. Trust no one, not even me. Get out and don't look back." Rhea hung up without waiting for a response, leaving Claire standing there, her mind racing. She had to make a choice, and fast. If she stayed, she would be trapped in the web the Sentinels had woven around her. If she ran, she might be able to escape, at least for a while. With no time to waste, Claire grabbed a small bag, hastily throwing in a few essentials. She couldn't take everything. She had to move quickly. As she rushed out of her apartment, her heart pounded in her chest. She had no idea who was on her tail, but she knew she was no longer safe. The city felt different now. Every street, every corner seemed to be watching her. She couldn't trust anyone, not even the people she once considered allies. The Sentinels were everywhere, and Claire had learned that they weren't just skilled in saving lives. They were experts at manipulating the system, erasing traces, and covering their tracks. It wasn't long before she found herself at the coordinates Ria had sent her, a remote location deep in the woods. It was a hidden safe house, a place where operatives like her could disappear if they were ever compromised. As Claire made her way through the dense forest, she couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every snap of a twig, every rustle in the bushes made her heart race. She was being hunted, and she could feel the eyes of the Sentinels on her, even if she couldn't see them. She had to move faster. She had to survive. The deep silence of the forest surrounded Claire as she trekked through the thick undergrowth. Every step she took seemed to echo louder than the last. Her mind was racing, torn between fear and determination. The Sentinels had been tracking her, and now they had come too close for comfort. It wasn't just her job or her safety at risk anymore. She was uncovering secrets that threatened to shatter the organization she had worked for, an organization she had once believed was a force for good. As Claire pushed through the dense trees, the outline of the safe house emerged from the shadows, a small, unassuming cabin tucked into the hillside, far from any main roads. It looked abandoned, but she knew better. This was a haven for those who had crossed the line, those who had learned too much. It was here that operatives could hide, lay low, and figure out their next move. The door creaked open as Claire stepped inside, her senses heightened. She had to be sure she wasn't walking into a trap. But there was no one here, not even the usual security measures. It was eerily quiet. She moved through the cabin cautiously, her eyes scanning every corner, every shadow. But as she reached the small table in the center of the room, she froze. A folder lay on the table, clearly placed for her to find. It wasn't just any folder. It was the kind of dossier that could change everything she thought she knew about the Sentinels. Claire opened the folder slowly, the weight of her own anxiety pressing down on her. Inside were photographs, documents, and records, everything she had been piecing together over the last few months. But there was something else, something that made her blood run cold. The names of people who had been part of the organization, people she had worked with, and worse yet, people who had mysteriously disappeared. There, among the names, was a photo, a man she recognized. A man she had trusted. It was Lucas, the leader of the Sentinel team she had been a part of. But this photo wasn't from a training session or a mission. It was taken in a dark alleyway, his face shadowed, meeting with a man she had never seen before. The caption underneath the photo read, "Lucas, asset for the Coalition. Secure extraction." Her heart skipped a beat. The Coalition. What was this? Lucas wasn't just a leader. He was part of something much bigger, something more dangerous. And it wasn't just about saving lives or helping people. It was about control, manipulation, and power. Claire slammed the folder shut. She couldn't process everything at once, but one thing was clear. She was no longer working for a rescue operation. The Sentinels were a front, a cover for something much darker. And Lucas, her trusted mentor, was not the man she thought he was. She needed answers. But the deeper she dug, the more she realized that the very foundation of the organization had been built on lies. What was their true agenda? And how far had they gone to cover it all up? Her thoughts were interrupted by a sudden noise outside, a low hum, followed by the distinct sound of a helicopter approaching. Claire's heart raced. She wasn't alone anymore. She ran to the window and peered out, but there was no sign of anyone. The helicopters were circling above, too high to make out who was piloting them, but low enough to signal that something was about to happen. Claire's instincts screamed at her to leave, to get out before it was too late. But there was nowhere to run. Not anymore. The sound of helicopter blades grew louder, vibrating through the walls of the cabin. Claire knew she didn't have much time. Her mind raced, torn between the need to confront the truth and the realization that everything had changed. The Sentinels had come for her, whether she liked it or not. They weren't going to let her walk away from this. She grabbed the folder from the table, tucked it into her bag, and moved toward the back door. If she was going to survive this, she needed to get out of sight. There were too many secrets, too many people who wanted to silence her, and the helicopters hovering outside her cabin were just the beginning. As she reached the edge of the property, Claire's heart pounded in her chest. Her training kicked in, guiding her through the dense woods that surrounded the cabin. She moved swiftly, taking care to cover her tracks, but deep down, she knew that Lucas, or someone from the Sentinels, would be hot on her heels. Minutes passed, each one feeling like an eternity. Claire didn't stop, not even when she heard the sound of footsteps behind her. She pushed herself harder, ignoring the sting in her legs, the aching in her lungs. She had to get to the safe house. There, she could figure out her next move. Then, suddenly, a voice called out to her, sharp and commanding. "Claire!" She spun around to find Lucas standing behind her, his figure partially obscured by the shadows. His expression was unreadable, but his presence alone told her everything she needed to know. He was part of this. He knew the truth. "Lucas," Claire said, her voice tight with anger and disbelief. "You're with them, aren't you?" Lucas didn't answer right away. His gaze shifted, as if weighing his words carefully. Finally, he spoke, his tone cold and distant. "You don't understand, Claire. This isn't just about saving lives. It's about control, about making sure the right people survive. The Sentinels aren't just a rescue operation. They're an insurance policy, a way to guarantee that the world stays in balance." Claire's heart sank. The man she had once looked up to, trusted with her life, was nothing more than a puppet in a much bigger game. "Balance," she repeated, her voice shaking with fury. "You call this balance? The lies, the cover-ups, the people who disappear without a trace? How many lives have you destroyed, Lucas? How many more will you sacrifice?" Lucas took a step forward, his gaze hardening. "Sometimes, sacrifices are necessary. The world doesn't work on ideals, Claire. It works on power." The realization hit her like a punch to the gut. Lucas wasn't just involved. He was one of the masterminds behind the Sentinels' true agenda. And she had been too blind to see it all along. Before she could react, the sound of a helicopter above them broke the silence. It was so close now, Claire could feel the gust of wind from the rotor blades. Lucas glanced up, a flash of hesitation crossing his face. "This isn't over, Claire," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "You're in too deep now. There's no going back." Claire didn't wait for him to finish. Without another word, she turned and bolted into the forest, her heart pounding in her chest. She had to get away. She had to expose the truth, no matter the cost. But as she ran, Claire couldn't shake the feeling that the helicopters were not just chasing her. They were watching, waiting for her next move. The world she had once known was gone. And now, all she had left was the truth, and a fight for survival. This story teaches us that even though the truth can sometimes be bitter and full of danger, it must still be revealed. In life, we are often faced with difficult choices between protecting ourselves and facing the reality. Just like Claire, who, despite being trapped in a world full of conspiracy, chose to fight for the truth, even at the cost of losing so much. The lesson here is that, although our journey may be full of trials, we must still have the courage to choose the right path, even if it comes with risks. Never be afraid to speak up or take action for the greater good, because the world needs more people who are willing to expose the truth, not just those who follow the status quo. Thank you for following this story. If you enjoyed it, please don't forget to leave a comment, like, and subscribe for more intriguing stories. Your support means a lot, and we'll keep bringing you inspiring tales.